This discourse is called Rewriting, Rescripting the Nightmare, Dreaming with Courage. The information for this discourse is inspired by insights given by Alberto Villoldo, PhD, shaman and medical anthropologist. His book, Courageous Dreaming, talks about the very things and the very essence of some of the beliefs in A Course in Miracles, and to a certain extent, some of the Vedantic Hindu philosophy. But more so, this really, according to the jacket description of the book, modern physics teaches us that we're all dreaming the world into being with every thought. The ancient shamans of the Americas understood that we're not only creating our experience of the world, but are dreaming up the very nature of reality. That is, life itself is but a dream. When we don't dream our existence, we have to settle for the nightmare others are conceiving. Basically, courageous dreaming talks about learning to dream your own world with power and grace, or from a state of illumination, I might add. It shows you how to wake up from the collective nightmare and to begin to fashion a life of courage and grace. A dream that Villoldo says is sacred, that shamans throughout time have known and served. So we want to get in touch with what Villoldo calls the matrix, this invisible matrix, which I have already mentioned in this program in earlier sessions, about where thought originates, the womb of creation, and related ideas as being the fertile ground from which all manifestation happens. Now, Buddha had once said that we are what we think, and all that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. Now, I'll say that we're not what we think. We sometimes manifest behaviors and attitudes that arise with our thoughts, but the only statement in there that could be said to be one of certitude is that our thoughts make the world. We're co-creators with the infinite divine mind, and we have the power to co-create reality with the universe itself. But that power, says Villoldo, slips away from us, causing our dream to become a nightmare. It becomes a nightmare when we feel like we are a victim of the world we see. An effect, not the cause. When we realize the positive power of causation in our ability to enact and recreate a new dream, a new reality, new surroundings, drawing new things to us, more exciting, more healthy things, more uplifting, more spiritual or wholesome things to us. It is a grand moment of liberation when you come to know that. The only way to end the reality that Villoldo calls dreadful is to awaken to the fact that we are trapped, that we are in a dream, and that we can write a better story. And the good news is the universe will work with us to do that. Now, keeping in line with the theme of the Thousand Barking Dogs, if we're thinking from that dog mind perspective, the reactive mind, where we simply react to what happens around us, where we make snap judgments, where we project all our dog desires out into the external world or seek to find fulfillment in the external world alone, the life force in our minds or brains becomes scattered, creating fragmentation in our thought. In fragmented thoughts, we'll create a fragmented reality or world. Courageous dreaming, says Villoldo, allows you to create from the source, the quantum soup, a term used also by Dr. Deepak Chopra. The quantum soup of the universe where everything exists in a latent or potential state. He says that physicists understand that in the quantum world, nothing is quote-unquote real until it is observed, and that the distinct packets of energy known as quanta, which consist of particles of matter as well as light, are neither here nor there. In a sense, they are everywhere, in space-time, until you or I decide to take note of them. And when we do so, we tease them out of the web of infinite possibilities and collapse them into an event in space and time. And these energy quanta, they like to link up with each other once they've selected a particular form of manifestation. As soon as they manifest, reality becomes fixed. Our reality is, quote-unquote, here, instead of possibly everywhere. But quantum events do not occur in the laboratory only. They also happen inside our brain, on this page from which I'm reading, and everywhere around us. Even if they're separated by millions of miles or by days or weeks, these quanta of energy remain intimately linked. Consequently, if you interact with one, you affect the entire system that this energy is part of. When you access any part of the dream, the great matrix of creation, you can change reality and alter the entire dream. And its effects will ripple to the past and influence the future. And I'd like to continue by saying that he, Villoldo that is, has discovered that modern physics is describing what the ancient wisdom keepers of the Americas have long known. These shamans, known as the earth keepers, say that we're dreaming the world into being through the very act of witnessing it. Scientists believe that we're only able to do this in the very small subatomic world. Shamans, on the other hand, understand that we also dream the larger world that we experience with our senses. So like the Australian Aborigines, the Earth Keepers live in an environment where dream time has not been pushed into the domain of sleep like it has for the rest of us. They know that all of creation arises from and returns to this creative matrix. The dreamtime infuses all matter and energy, connecting every creature, every rock, every star, and every ray of light or bit of cosmic dust. The power to dream, then, is the power to participate in creation itself. Dreaming reality is not only an ability but a duty, one all humans must perform with grace so that our grandchildren will inherit a world where they can live in peace and abundance. Now, the Earth Keepers refer to dreamtime also as infinity. The Earth Keepers also say that we can only access the power of this force used to dream the universe into being by raising our level of consciousness. And when we do, we become aware that we're like a drop of water in a vast divine ocean, distinct, yet immersed in something much larger than ourselves. Villoldo says that it's only when we experience our connection to infinity that we're able to dream powerfully. In fact, it's our sense of separation from infinity that traps us in a nightmare in the first place. This thinking is circular. So what came first, the nightmare or the sense of separation from infinity? The real answer to that is that they are occurring simultaneously. To end the nightmare, for us to be able to reclaim our power of dreaming reality and to make something better, we need more than just a cognitive recognition of how this process works. You need to have what Villoldo calls a visceral understanding deep down in your belly of your dreaming power and experience it in every cell of your body. Being able to comprehend your ability to create reality is quite phenomenal. But you need to get beyond the intellectual comprehension of this concept. Because if you don't, Villoldo says you'll lower the bar and create a far less glorious and beautiful experience of the world than what you're potentially able to do. With that gut understanding of your power to dream, you realize that you can share this experience of infinity right here, right now, and stop feeling dissociated or removed or blocked off from it and disconnected. Now, once you experience dreaming, you realize that everything in your life is unfolding with perfect synchronicity. Now, certain events may not be working out the way you'd like them to, but within the greater scheme of things, they are happening within some context of harmony. For instance, about our ability to redirect or rewrite what we experience. If the universe seems to be conspiring against you, then you need to change the dream. And again, it's with courageous dreaming that you discover problems, perceived problems, are no longer overwhelming, burdensome to you, or nor do they define your life. We need to use our hearts as well, or according to Villoldo, our dreams will stall at the level of thinking, planning, and worrying too much. Then our dream will turn into a nightmare or mere fantasy, trapping us or drifting away while we wonder, what happened? So, when we lack courage to dream, we must settle for a world created by culture, external culture, and genes. That is, to settle for the nightmare. Now, what we have to do is get over ourselves and get over our little tiny stories, our tragic stories and dramas. We basically have the choice of having the life we want or the reasons that we can't. Again, I'll mention the victim. The victim must be transmuted into the hero that makes a conscious choice to create a sacred dream and to practice courage. Part of the whole process is recognizing that you are living in a nightmare, that the state of perception that created it was erroneous or limiting. Now, we have all sorts of inner turmoil, inner turbulence, those barking dogs of moods, sense inclinations, habits, attitudes, ingrained response or reactive patterns. They all create noise that help to confuse the mind, confuse the tool that can be used with the heart as a servant in service to the heart by helping to bring into existence higher consciousness. The basic curse of society, of which we all tend to be victims from, is that of the materialistic mandate to attain and accumulate, and thereby measuring our self-worth is a result of how much we can actually hoard, take in, or acquire. We won't be truly happy unless we discover that life is rich with meaning and purpose. Villoldo uses the image of the frog stuck in a pot of hot water that's slowly boiling. The feeling that we have that we're slowly dying. So what we do to cope is we reach for quick fix answers, minimal effort, and we talk ourselves into believing that we found shortcuts to happiness. So we need to overcome cowardice through conviction, principles, dreams, and hope. Villoldo says when we're brave, we take risks in order to meet our survival needs. And with the courage of the soul, we don't focus on self-preservation, security, or safety. Rather, such courage compels us to risk our comfort and safety, and sometimes our lives. Dreaming courageously is experiencing higher levels of consciousness. Courage on the map, the scale of the map of consciousness, calibrated by Dr. David Hawkins. Courage is in the realm of truth. Anything below that is in falsehood. I don't mean to sound redundant, but in examining Villoldo's work, he says we need to choose to create a new and better reality right now instead of waiting for our life to get better. That here at this point in his book, he mentions that there will be exercises to help us access the strength to act, to be proactive, to basically clean up the mess in the river of our life, and to stop reliving and retelling the same stories of victimhood and powerlessness. So, in Villoldo's eyes, it's not a matter, the spiritual journey is not a matter of reaching a permanent state of enlightenment in this life, because that won't happen. But what we can do is to improve our situations, to have glimpses of that enlightenment, and to learn more and more to live in the space of what I would say grace or sanctification or empowerment and illumination. Thought reversal, corrections of misperceptions, as is taught in A Course in Miracles and The Way of Mastery, is the way to help dream a new dream, and literally writing a new script in which you will live out the movie of your life. Moving forward in the book, in part 1, from nightmare to dream, Villoldo goes right after the idea of escaping the nightmare, and he uses some personal stories to introduce us to his main themes. He says that a lot of us have apathy, which is basically a mixture between depression and learned helplessness. This feeds into the victim consciousness that he speaks about. We are our own worst enemy. And we experience this especially so when we are paralyzed by egoic thinking and in particular fear, which is the poison, the wound of poison that Toltec master Don Miguel Ruiz speaks of, that we all carry around with us. These wounds of poison, these wounds of fear. These things keep us from dreaming courageously and keep us in bondage to dreaming our own little dreams of hell, and on a collective scale, these dreams of hell. If you remember back to early on in this whole program, when we talked about Don Miguel Ruiz's wisdom teachings. Villoldo says that all of us are born with two piles of suitcases that we drag around with us, our psychological and genetic baggage. And he says that both of these legacies are responsible for scripts of our personal nightmares. Now, psychological issues get woven into the stories we tell about our lives and examine on the therapist's couch. Mother was too demanding, our self-esteem suffered, we never had faith in ourselves, and were unable to be honest in relationships or to persevere in our goals. These tales, says Villoldo, impact our luminous energy field, the LEF, that Villoldo refers to, which is the light body that encases our physical body as if it were a second skin. In fact, shamans see these as karmic issues, which they perceive energetically as dark imprints in the LEF. I think what Villoldo is talking about is the aura, but I don't think the Earth Keepers and the shamans he's worked with use that exact word. So the LEF, in terms of shamanic teachings that Villoldo has come across, is probably the equivalent of the aura. Because an aura, a human aura, can be polluted with or poisoned with dark energy patterns or cords of darkness that usually show up as gray, murky color. For those who can detect auras or measure it through science now that can, such as Kirlian photography. Villoldo says that the LEF organizes your body in the same way that the energy fields of a magnet organize iron fillings on a piece of glass. But he says, however, your LEF also informs your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors, and these in turn choreograph whom you're going to be attracted to, date, and marry. And ultimately, it's the information encoded in your LEF that predisposes you to a particular kind of job and boss, and determines the themes that will surface in your relationship with your partner. So the LEF, to reiterate, informs our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors, and then what I'm adding is what we manifest, because our thoughts manifest the reality we come to know. In relativity, in Mayan delusion, in illusion, in what seems to be the material world that surrounds us. The LEF, Villoldo says, is the instrument through which you dream the world into being. And it consists of light and vibration. So whatever you vibrate in the LEF, you create in the world. Now, some teachings that I've come across that probably would validate this exact statement are, well, one from what we mentioned earlier from Joseph Chilton Pierce, the electromagnetic hormonal intuitive heart that sends off a torus, an electromagnetic field that, when measured and when depicted, looks like an Earth, a globe, a planet, a sphere. This torus extends, as he said, outside our body 12 feet. And if that is a microcosm of the holographic mind to which we all belong in the macrocosm. He speaks of this microcosm and macrocosm, the holographic mind, in his book Magical Thinking. Dark energy or karmic imprints in our LEF. I just need to correct myself for a minute. The book that I was just mentioning was not Magical Thinking, it was The Magical Child. Just wanted to correct myself. But getting back to karmic imprints or dark imprints or energetic poison, so to speak, that gets into our LEF or the aura, can get us stuck in beliefs that are self-limiting. My mom ruined my life, or the stork dropped me off at the wrong home. These wounds that Villoldo talk about, when they remain unhealed, they become the reasons why we can't have what we want, truly in our hearts, not in our mind or in our egos, which is more or less doing the will of the divine mind by getting in touch with the desires of our hearts. But we get stuck in what psychologists call the repetition compulsion. Eckhart Tolle speaks of this and about our thinking. That almost all of thought is repetitive and useless, and it becomes the chatter that the ego produces becomes compulsive. And as was mentioned in the sections about compulsiveness and obsessiveness, it's hard to shut off. It's hard to undo that pattern, especially when anxiety is fueling it, that anxiety gap that we go into. It's like a vacuum. Sucks in all nervous energy. And then we emit it through our thoughts into what we create, which is a living hell. Now, shamans heal karmic wounds using specialized techniques for working with energy to clear the dark imprints in the LEF, because these contain information that will produce disease. I can relate to this in my shamanic work that I have done with others in work known as extraction, removing foreign energy intrusions. Now, Villoldo said he's come to understand that DNA is the hardware that creates the body by manufacturing proteins, while the LEF is the software that provides the instructions to the DNA system. When we clear the LEF, we're no more longer doomed to relive the ailments of our parents or carry the old karmic baggage through lifetime after lifetime. We stop dragging those chains, so to speak, as I would say, of the ghosts, like you see in the tale of A Christmas Carol, the ghost with the chains. Now, a shaman might clear the imprint of a karmic wound from the LEF through what's called, or what Villoldo calls, the illumination process. And he describes that in another book called Shaman, Healer, and Sage. So wounds in our energy body can show up in our physical body as well, because our energy body informs and creates the physical body, as Deepak Chopra teaches. It will even inform our DNA, creating a genetic legacy for our children, so we hand down the baggage, we hand down the karma. Some more right-wing or more conservative Christians might refer to this in the deliverance movement or deliverance work as curses. Some would say that it's curses of God handed down through the bloodline. Well, others might believe it's attributed to a satanic being. So we all carry genes that predispose us to a variety of ailments, which will appear in our physical body if we live a lifestyle that's in alignment with our karmic wound. We all have wounds. We're all wounded, not just with fear, the poison of fear, but everything that comes from fear is ultimately potentially crippling. Not all illnesses are the work of karma, though. Some were certainly caused by environmental toxins that affect us, while others are the result of simply destructive lifestyle choices and don't have a hereditary element. But whatever Villoldo says our genetic legacy is, we can prevent it from creating illness or other personal nightmares for us. And we do so by healing the LEF, the luminous energy field. And he does an extensive, as I understand, an extensive study of that in shamanic healing, a program on Nightingale, found a product of Nightingale Connet Productions. So we can prevent creating illness or other personal nightmares for us. I think that's important. And we need to bear that in mind. We need to clean up the river of life, of light that flows through us. And be ready to die to our false self, the little I, the suffering I, the I that feels vulnerable, because the real true I, the true self, that of the God self, it can't be sick. It isn't sick. It never was sick. It can't feel fear because it is fear's opposite, which is absolute love. So dying to the false self into the false dream sets the scene for a new and better dream. So we have individual nightmares, and as mentioned in other parts of this program, there is the cultural nightmare. Seemingly from babyhood forward, we're spoon-fed a set of expectations that most of us don't bother to question until the day we wake up and realize that our lives aren't working for us. Villoldo says, and he says, even with all the social changes we've gone through as a civilization in the last 50 years, we find ourselves easily buying into scripted ideas about how we should live our lives and measure our worth and happiness. Father Thomas Keating says that we all have false programs for happiness that are either engendered through our nature, maybe karmically or genetically, but also from mostly our nurturing, from the type of nurturing we receive or lack thereof that we receive or don't receive, which psychologists call the nature-nurture debate, and they, what came first, chicken or the egg thing. So when we subscribe to the collective nightmare, all the social programming out there, we convince ourselves that we can avoid suffering by working hard to acquire a slightly better job, or a slightly better home, a bigger home, a car, a certain car, the newest and best car out there, a slightly better collection of stuff than the next guy has, and a slightly better looking romantic partner than we feel we deserve. Basically, we determine our happiness by how much progress we're making toward the big goal of lasting material fulfillment, which society says, the dream of society, or the collective dream of hell, basically imposes upon us. We very rarely, though we live in misery, think about or talk to ourselves about or talk to others about what is making us unhappy, that our particular lifestyle could be making us unhappy or unfulfilled. And a simple measure of that, I would say, is seeing to what level or lack of inner peace or deep calmness. We're too focused on our problems. That's what Villoldo says. And all our energy goes into thinking about, worrying about, and trying to fix our concerns. And what we should be doing is shifting our perception to a higher level so that we can tap into our courage and imagine a world that isn't beleaguered with issues and actually dream it into being. We all have ideal visions. For most of us, it's the American dream, the materialistic, consumer-oriented dream of acquisition. Father Richard Rohr talks about a spirituality of subtraction. And maybe we need to be thinking in terms of less, of having less, of acquiring less, of seeking external stimulation less and less from the outside world. But by remaining stuck in our minds, what Villoldo calls the level of jaguar, in shamanic terms, keeps us focused on trying to overcome our obstacles by creating security for ourselves in the material world. Folks, financial success will protect us from harm. It's a false belief. It's not gonna cut it. And to many, that can become devastating when we realize that when the world seems to crumble around us, crumble down into nothing around us. So social success, trying to aim for that as a form of security, for love and admiration we might never have received fully or feel like we receive fully, lack of the affection program for happiness. Many of us are so driven by the need for approval by others. And believe me, I include myself in all of what I'm talking about. Because just because you're on the spiritual journey doesn't guarantee that you become any less human or any less subject to the human condition. Even masters such as Jesus, Yeshua, and modern saints like Paramahansa Yogananda, Mother Teresa, Gandhi, they were subject to the human condition. What basically Villoldo is trying to say is that with courage of the soul, we don't need to define ourselves by big houses, nice cars, worldwide fame, or social position. But we could enjoy those things as long as we're aligned to higher consciousness. Our dreams need to stop being goals we strive for and start becoming a way of life. And they cease being rooted in fears of lack and scarcity and are instead rooted in love and abundance. And while the dreams of the soul serve our needs as individuals, they also serve those of the world. These are sacred dreams, fresh, creative, and able to infuse us with passion to act. So we need to stop dreaming uncreatively in self-limiting manners. We need to apply principles that quantum physics has taught us about reality and perception, about how our perceptions help bring about reality. We need to know that self-fulfilling prophecies can ultimately be our doom. And most of the time they are. So co-creating a new reality by engaging in a more global mindedness, more global soul mindedness, or what I would like to call Project New Humanity, the emerging new humanity. We need to relinquish all the things that we think are our true self in order to script new dreams. Not to repeatedly project our nightmares. So in the next half of this discourse, we'll talk about archetypal patterns that we've become trapped in, how to release ourselves from karmic cords and wounds, moving beyond the dramas that we, in fact, identify ourselves with.